Knowing the dates and deadlines for filing your taxes and all those tax rules can help you avoid penalties and a lot of stress as well. The problem are some of those dates are strange and they don't make sense. I'll explain the 3 most important dates you need to know. I've got that and more coming up. My name's Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. There's a difference between tax preparation and tax planning. Tax preparation is about looking backwards, getting the right number in the right box, and having a compliant tax return. Compliant meaning you've captured all income, all deductions, you file it on time, and you get your refund or you pay a little if you didn't have the right amount paid in. That's tax preparation. You're required to do it if you have income and so on. Tax planning is not required. It's also not reactionary like tax preparation is. Tax planning is all about being proactive, looking ahead of time to see what opportunities exist for you to pay the least amount of tax over your lifetime, and then through the financial planning lens, looking at all 6 areas of your financial life, which of these tax planning strategies to improve your tax picture, which ones should you implement? Not all of them will you be able to implement because there's constraints in the rest of your financial life, but which of the good ones are great and you should implement? So there's a difference between tax preparation, tax planning, and I often say tax planning is avoid surprises and capture opportunities. Avoid surprises and capture opportunities. And so one of the avoid surprises comes with knowing the dates and deadlines for some of the taxes, okay, tax returns or tax payments. And the challenge is it can be a surprise because some of these dates are strange, they're illogical, they don't fully make sense. And so to avoid penalties, avoid a lot of stress, and avoid, like I said, that surprise, what are the 3 most important tax dates that you need to know? Well, the first is the obvious one, and that's the date of when to file, okay? So there is no, just predictable start to the tax season every year. The IRS announces sometime in the second half of January when they begin accepting, when they're able to start accepting e-files or accepting tax returns, typically around the 20th, 22nd, 26th, something like that of January. It's not an exact date, the start to the filing year, but somewhere in mid to late January, okay? Your W-2s and most of your 1099s are required to be in the mail and sent to you by January 31st. We're familiar, at least many of us are familiar with that deadline as part of this when to file. But not every tax form must be sent out by January 31st. Most of them, W-2, most 1099s, but brokerage accounts, so non-IRA 1099s, those actually no longer have a January 31st deadline. It used to be at the beginning of my career, and what would happen is they would just throw some numbers together, send it out to you, and then people would file their return based off of that, and then ultimately they would get a corrected 1099 for their brokerage account, updating some capital gains or some of the information. They would get that, they'd send that out in late February, and people would have to amend their returns, and it would be messy. So now those brokerage 1099s, those are typically sent into February, late February, some of them very early March, so you need to be aware of that. So that deadline, that January 31st deadline is there, but doesn't apply to all of your tax documents. And speaking of K1 tax documents, there's no deadline on those either. And so that's if you have an estate or a trust or a partnership or own a more sophisticated type of investment. The taxes and the income that will be reported on those forms, there isn't a deadline where someone needs to send out that K1 to you by a certain time. So just be aware of that. But all of that is going to answer the, time to file, when to file, April 15. We know that that's the tax filing deadline, except the reason why it's bizarre, the reason why it's strange is it's April 15th unless it isn't. And if April 15th falls on a weekend, it's typically then the tax filing deadline is pushed to the Monday of that next week. But oftentimes on that Monday of the next week, there is a holiday that's mostly recognized just in Washington, D.C., Emancipation Day, that will then delay the tax filing deadline another day later. So pretty common for us to see, instead of April 15, for it to be April 17 or April 18, something like that. So be aware of that. April 15 should be the day, but each year, if you're going to get close to that deadline, you're going to want to look it up just to know for sure. So that's the first strange day that you need to know. The second strange date that you need to know for taxes is the extension. Everyone is allowed an automatic extension on the time they get to file their taxes. Now, this is important. This is not an extension of the time you get to pay your taxes. Your taxes are due. If it's withholdings, that tax is due by the end of the year. Not by the time you file your return, it's due the end of the year. And if you're paying estimates, that is actually due prior to as well. And if you think you're going to owe taxes when you file your return, you need to send that in by April 15 or whatever the filing deadline is as well. So even though that's when payments are due, anyone can file for an automatic extension, which extends the time at which they need to file a return, or you need to file a return, automatically by 6 months. In the past, there used to be different extension periods, and you could elect, well, a 3-month or a different. Now it's just automatic 6 months. You don't need to have certain circumstances in order to receive this 6 months. All you need to do is apply for the extension or file for that extension, and bam, it moves that tax filing deadline from April 15 to October 15. Now, if the April 15 date wasn't exactly April 15, do you get an extra 6 months from that April 18th or whatever? Commonly, no. Typically, no. So if you are extending your tax return, know that the time at which you need to pay your taxes for them to be on time, that is not extended. It only extends the amount of time you have to file an accurate and completed tax return, and you get an automatic 6 months, commonly by October 15 is when that is required. All right, and then the last bizarre or strange deadline or date that you need to know when it comes to taxes goes back to those tax payments, okay? So if you are withholding taxes, and like most people that are just working, and that's where pretty much all of your income comes from, and your employer is withholding taxes from your paycheck, and that's how you're paying your taxes, then you're fine. You don't really think about it this way, but all those withholdings are done during that calendar year. You withhold enough because that's pretty much all the income you have, and it all sorts itself out. There's no worry that you didn't pay in enough or you've got a penalty. But as your financial life gets more complicated, or your income sources stretch beyond just having a paycheck, maybe you're retired and have Social Security and have withdrawals from investments. Maybe you have some non-IRA investments, and that's creating capital gains and dividends. And maybe you own a business or a rental, or who knows. As you get more complexity in your finances, you may not be able to withhold enough, or you might not have any income that you can withhold taxes on. And at that point, you need to explore, well, how else do I get taxes paid in? Well, those are tax estimates, often referred to as quarterly estimates. Well, why is this one of the strange dates or times that you need to be familiar with in order to do taxes? Is because quarterly taxes implies that you have to pay in taxes each quarter. And that's not true. That is not how this is applied. Your quarterly taxes are due, the first quarter is due April 15, or slightly thereafter. It's going to align with whatever that tax filing deadline is. But that's your first quarter payment. Your second quarter payment is due June 15. That's right, not a quarter later, not 3 months later, 2 months later, June 15. The third quarter payment is due September 15. Okay, so that's 3 months, that makes sense. So what's the last quarter? What's the fourth quarter payment? Probably mid-December, right? No, January 15 of the following year. You need to know, in order to successfully navigate our tax system and avoid tax surprises like I mentioned earlier, you've got to be aware of, well, if you venture past just withholding taxes and you need to start doing tax estimates, you need to be aware that those tax estimates, those quarterly tax estimates, don't align with each quarter. And then finally, in regards to this timing, If you have income, a lot of income in a certain year, then you need to align that quarter's payment with that quarter's income. So if you did a Roth conversion in the third quarter, you needed to do a tax payment in that third quarter. Okay, it shouldn't, otherwise it could be considered late. So the whole premise of understanding those strange dates is to avoid tax surprises, avoid penalties, avoid a surprise, avoid all the stress and strife that can come from our complicated and confusing tax system. Doing tax planning, though, will capture all of that, avoid surprises, and identify and help you capture opportunities. That's the work that you really need to be doing with your certified financial planner. If you don't have a CFP on your team, contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or give us a call, 574-247-5898. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.